Hi guys, welcome back to Read the Heart. We don come again with another update about the things wey dey go on for our country. My people, Wike and his supporters wan cause war for Rivers State. Wike has done more harm in Rivers State. My people, for dis video una go watch plenty things wey dey go on for Rivers State. Abeg, if you don watch the video, feel free to drop your opinion. And if you never subscribe to dis channel, subscribe make you for dey get our update. Subscription na free.
Assembly deciding to move ahead, essentially the initial steps of impeachment proceedings against Governor Fubara. I mean, it was always in the air, wasn't it? But now that it has actually been initiated, how do you view it all? Is it just sort of hot air, or are there valid grounds for impeachment?
Yes, thank you very much, Charles, for the invitation, the privilege. What we are witnessing now is the denouement of a plot that has since been hushed. Because one had expected that maybe after the Supreme Court decision on these cases, there should have been some little time and some opportunity for matters to slow and calm down, and for people to look inwards and consider a lot of things. But just a few weeks after the shuffle between the communications from the governor and the one from the Speaker of the House of Assembly, and some getting to a stage where the governor had to be locked out of the House of Assembly, we now have an impeachment proceedings, and that was exactly what instigated the crisis in the first place. Well, the Supreme Court has said that it was the impeachment process that instigated, made the governor to collapse the House of Assembly, and on the matter went, and the matter went to several courts. I would say, Charles, that the impeachment process is coming a little too early, because we just had the judgment of the Supreme Court some couple of weeks ago, and there has been attempts by the governor. He had actually stated that he was going to abide by that judgment in its entirety, and there are some moves to have this matter settled amicably. And I had always thought that probably with the failure of the president to bring this nerves, to calm these nerves, there should have been the intervention of the Supreme Court that would be a little more amenable to settlement, to amicable settlement. These people are kinsmen. These are political bedfellows as well, even though they turned out to be strange. But between Fubara and Wike, they were the best of friends, and tomorrow is another day. And I'm sure that's that part of willingness, that inclination to willingness, which has been displayed to a large extent, particularly by the governor. Even on the other side, when you're getting some bit of hostility, we also remember that some members of the House had indicated that, well, anything that will settle this matter will settle it for good. One of the problems we have with our constitutional framework is the fact that people read it upside down, probably because we are not very familiar with the constitutional systems. Coming from the Supreme Court in the manner that we did, and the matters did, I think the first thing that should have taken place is a referendum. But you go to some pundits and they tell you that there's nothing like a referendum in our constitution.
Well, I mean, if they can't, sorry to interrupt you, if they can't even hold, regularly scheduled elections, I mean, the referendums, although you're technically right, I mean, talk about monstrous complications. Yeah. But let me ask you this, as we gallop ahead in the interest of time, assuming, of course, which is the way that it looks at the moment, that the assemblymen the lawmakers are moving ahead with attempts to impeach the governor. I understand that there is, or there was, a court order preventing the State Assembly from making any moves towards impeachment. The members of the National Assembly who support Governor Fubara have issued a statement to that effect this evening. And I'm wondering whether you're aware of that court order, and whether in fact it is still valid, or has it been superseded? Because court orders seem to come in rapid succession in Rivers State.
Exactly. Well, that's where the confusion comes in. At the early stage of the imbroglio, there were several orders flying left, right, and center from different courts. I remember there's one restraining them from starting impeachment proceedings against the governor. Whatever happened to that one, I thought probably it's part of the matter that went to the Supreme Court on appeal, but it happens not to be there because I went through the entirety of the judgments of the Supreme Court in the consolidated appeals, which was determined, and there was nothing like that. So apparently the court order is still subsisting. Very likely it is still subsisting. I recall very well there was that order, and it's true, and probably maybe we've forgotten about it and moved ahead. But the important thing to note is that a lot of the grounds of the allegations, if you want me to take a step further in that direction, a lot of those grounds are not grounds that are viable because those grounds that were covered then by orders of court, by court proceedings, by judicial intervention. And for we lawyers, we know that the rule of least pendants apply, so that you cannot hold him responsible for things that happened maybe as a result of an order of court, for instance, that he abandoned the House of Assembly, that he did not consult them and all that. The matter over their defection was in court. The doctrine of least pendants will apply to nullify those grounds, because anything that should go the way of impeachment must be something that started from the date the judgment of the Supreme Court was delivered. Because all these issues they raise as grounds of impeachment, upon which a notice of gross misconduct. But remember, Charles, they used the word gross. We have matters that were pending, went through the courts, went through the appeal process, and all that until it got to the Supreme Court, which is the apex court, and they were determined. Well, you cannot hold the governor responsible for that. For instance, in one aspect of the judgment of the Supreme Court said that the governor was the person that collapsed the building of the House of Assembly, and he should pay the sum of 10 million naira. Will you hold the governor responsible for that on the basis of that judgment? Was the governor arraigned? Did he go through the process of arraignment, through the process of plea? As we know internationally, it's covered under international law very, very well. So you cannot rightly pronounce that because the Supreme Court said so. He was never tried by the Supreme Court. By the way, the immunity clause is still covering him. So that statement by the Supreme Court is not one you can hold on to or hang on to tenaciously and use that as a ground of impeachment.
That's very interesting indeed. And I wonder, when we talk about gross misconduct, if that can be flipped the other way to the conduct of the members of the Assembly, who themselves have displayed absolutely spectacular, some would argue, misconduct, and I mean, the grossest imaginable. Anyway, beyond that, I mean, is there anything left in Governor Fubara's arsenal that will be big enough or strong enough or even diabolical enough to counter the unrelenting determination of Nyesom Wike and his loyalists to crush the governor completely?
I think by the contents of the notice of impeachment, the notice of gross misconduct, which they served on the governor this afternoon, which they issued. Initially, when I saw it, I was shocked to my bones because I thought maybe that civility will prevail and some bit of decency will come into maybe in the interest of the people of Rivers State, in the interest of justice, in the interest of peace. But where we find ourselves now is this stark reality that this process is going on, and these people are seriously determined to get this done. It's a very sorry situation as far as I'm concerned, and it's not that the governor finds himself in a sort of difficult situation or a cul-de-sac that he cannot act. He can act. He can do a lot of things. The defense is there. He has his rights to fair hearing. He must be heard by the Assembly. The grounds of impeachment, the grounds upon which the notice was served on him will be properly looked into, to be looked against the backdrop of the doctrine of least pendants, which I earlier alluded to, and of course the issue of the competence of the House itself to impeach him. I mean, what weight should be given to the Supreme Court judgment, whether it's decision that they are the authentic members of the House of Assembly is one that is a final decision and part of the subject matter of appeal, or one that should be treated as an obiter dictum. But I look at it through all, and I think that the governor has very solid grounds to resist this attempt to push him out of office. He has very solid grounds. It depends on his manner of presentation and, of course, the procedures, the 8-point procedures that must be followed. They are not an easy task at all. It's a very uphill task for anybody to dispense with. The provisions of Section 188 are provisions that are mandatory, and these procedures, these steps must be taken one after the other. You cannot jump one particular one. You cannot jump the needle from one to the other. So it's something that must be followed in the democratic sense. But the point to be made also, Charles, is that I think we all have a duty to preserve the constitutional framework which everybody fought to put on ground, and also to ensure that our democratic traditions are well settled and well settled with precedent. We have a situation here which I consider rather very awkward, and it boils down to the people of Rivers State. Nobody's considering them at all, and they are holding the bad end of the stick in whatever is happening between the governor and the former governor. These are, so it's something that
well, let me take you up. Let me take you up on that, and sorry to interrupt you, but let me take you up because you mentioned a number of times now the people of Rivers State, and that obviously underscores your concern for those people. In that regard, what's the mood? What's the mood like in Rivers State following this attempt to start impeachment proceedings against the governor? Is there a sense of a deepening crisis, or perhaps growing alarm, or are people taking it in their stride, or are we looking at something possibly worse? Because, there were threats. There were threats from some groups in Rivers State that if impeachment proceedings were initiated, that things could well get completely and utterly out of hand.
That's a fantastic question, Charles. The mood here is one of tension, the apprehension, total apprehension, because nobody knows the next thing that will happen. We are all familiar with the volatility of this place, the Niger Delta, particularly Rivers State. We all know the effects of whatever threats are being made. Somebody has said that they keep threatening and they don't do nothing. This region sustained insurgency, militancy for many years before the late President Shehu Yaradua came in and intervened and gave them palliatives and amnesty, which calmed them down. That is why we must tread with caution with this Rivers State crisis. And the idea of taking it, maybe making it a tribal thing and, considering it as being totally inconsequential, whatever threat is coming from anybody, is being very insensitive to the issues here on ground, And as far as I am concerned, the FCT minister ought to have played a better role, considering his antecedents and his position in government, to ensuring that peace is preserved. He has not done that. The governor also ought to have even advanced a little further, even beyond his being locked out of the House of Assembly, to seek to reconcile with his... There are some of his kinsmen there also, the Ijaws are still there in the House of Assembly, rather than leaving it bare like that and putting people in serious apprehension. And I think the tension here is quite high since the days of the church program at Abalama, just around the corner here. People have been living in absolute fear, and I don't know how far that will take. The drums of war have been beaten in the creeks, and I think it's something that should fetch the attraction and intervention of the president to slowing things down, getting his minister to take things a little bit easy, which is what we all expect. In a political game of chess, you don't have it all, you don't take it all, you give and take, and that's what every responsible leader should be looking at this current situation in Rivers State.
And just picking up on that last line that you just uttered, do you think a political settlement can ever now emerge given today's development? I mean, or will it have to end as outright defeat for one side or the other? Because the way things are building up, you yourself talked about it, with such intense, almost hatred, I mean, it's hard to imagine any kind of political settlement.
Well, I don't see anything that cannot be settled, but I think if the option of political settlement ought to have been explored, it should have come from the Supreme Court's decision. Unfortunately, it did not come from that angle at all, and that's quite some disappointment because, like I said, it's not just a court of law; it's also a court of policy. And the situation they had created is one that has bred this hostility that we are going through. Of course, some persons have been using intemperate language to describe their failures, even something that should that's capable of arousing ethnic disfavor. And people are not taking it lightly because, like I said, the volatility of this region cannot be undermined, cannot be underrated. And one would expect that people will apply some bit of, in spite of what the Supreme Court said, some bit of logic and diplomacy to get this menace out of the way. It's a simple menace. Some few persons, members of the House of Assembly, the governor, the former governor, drawing daggers on themselves. And for that reason, you withdraw a whole constitutional allocation, sovereign allocation of a state. Where does that happen? It makes me recall the words of Obama when he visited Ghana some few years ago, that some African countries are not moving forward because individuals are stronger than the states. I begin to wonder and shudder how possible it will be that a whole allocation that pertains to the running of the state system, payments of salaries, every other thing, can be withdrawn by an order of a court. Where does the court get that power from? And I recall that there are several precedents. The last time I was here, I was on this show with you, Charles, if you recall. We mentioned AG Lagos against AG Federation. One learned professor, a senior of mine, came and said, well, they are not applicable, but they are there for the purposes of constitutional interpretation. And I tell you that the reason why the Supreme Court took that position in AG Lagos and against AG Federation was because the issue of revenue allocation is a constitutional matter that only the National Assembly can do it. So if you want to withdraw the allocation to a particular state that is a member, a sub-national unit within the Federal Republic of Nigeria, is something that requires amendments of the Constitution. So when courts now begin to give such orders under our constitutional framework, then you know that things have gone haywire. I don't think it's a welcome development, and there cannot be any precedent that will be created from this river state imbroglio. By the grace of Almighty, we are not looking forward to any judicial precedent that should be cited in future on these disturbances.
On that note, I want to thank you very much indeed.